First reading is from Psalm 93. The Lord reigns. He is robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. Indeed, the word is established, firm and secure. Your throne was established long ago. You are from all eternity. The seas have lifted up, Lord. The seas have lifted up their voice. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves. Mightier than the thunder of the great waters, mightier than the breakers of the sea. The Lord on high is mighty. Your statutes, Lord, stand firm. Holiness adorns your house for endless days. And the second reading is from Mark 3, verses 1 to 12. Jesus heals on the Sabbath. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and, deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Crowds followed Jesus. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard about all he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan and around Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him to keep the people from crowding him. For he had healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Whenever the impure spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." But he gave them strict orders not to tell others about him. These are the words of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
One of the deepest longings of the human heart is not simply to be helped or even to be loved, but to be seen. To be truly seen, not glanced at, not assessed, not reduced to a role or a person or a problem, but to actually be known. Known for our strengths and for our weaknesses, in what we show and in what we carefully keep hidden. We live in a world of being looked at constantly, yet rarely truly seen for who we are. We are visible on screens and on systems, as I will be later on YouTube, later today with this talk, measured by targets and statistics, recognized by what we produce in GCSEs or in A-levels, rather than actually who we are. And so many people quietly carry the sense of being unseen. Into that longing, today's readings speak with surprising tenderness and authority. Psalm 93 proclaims with confidence and majesty, "The Lord is King." Mark 3 shows us what that kingship looks like when it steps into an ordinary space, meeting an ordinary person, and chooses mercy. Psalm 93 begins not with an argument, but with a declaration. The Lord reigns, it says. He is robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. This is a psalm that refuses anxiety. God's authority does not need defending. God doesn't panic or scramble to regain control. His throne, we are told, was established long ago. You are from all eternity. God's reign stretches beyond time itself. Before our anxieties, before our arguments, before our failures and fears, before all of that, God reigns. The psalmist then paints a vivid picture of chaos. The seas have lifted up, Lord. The seas have lifted up their voice. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves. In the ancient world, the sea symbolizes everything humans couldn't control. It symbolized danger and disorder and threat. And we don't have to stretch far to recognize that image today. Our world often feels loud with chaos, global conflict, environmental fear, economic circumstance, and those times when we feel personally overwhelmed and the noise around us just never stops and we can't think because it's too noisy. But yet the psalm insists, mightier than the thunder of the great waters, mightier than the breakers of the sea, the Lord on high is mighty. God's authority is not shaken by the noise of the world. And it's with this vision of unshakable, eternal authority ringing in our ears that we turn to our reading in Mark, where that same authority walks quietly into a synagogue. Mark tells us that Jesus enters the synagogue on the Sabbath. It's an ordinary religious setting. People have gathered there for worship, for teaching, for prayer, just like us today. And there's a man in there with a withered hand. Mark doesn't tell us his name, though. He just tells us his condition. And that alone, I think, is telling. So often, people become known by what is wrong with them, the diagnosis, the limitation, the thing that stands out. I remember as a 7-year-old, when I came back from Germany, and after many brain surgeries, was allowed to go to school part-time. I was known as, the one with the shaved head with the big scar who wears a hat. The new one that looked different. And we've all done that. If we really ask ourselves, we've all done that. But there are others in the room as well, religious leaders who are watching Jesus closely. Not because they're hoping for healing, but because they're waiting for a mistake. They're waiting for him to mess up. And this here, right here in verse 2, is the first collision of authority in this passage. And we must ask ourselves, whose authority matters most? The authority of compassion or the authority of control? Before Jesus says anything about the law, before he heals, before he challenges anyone, he does something deeply significant. He calls the man forward. He brings him right into the center. He sees him and he asks him. Jesus knows his name. Jesus knows him. And this bringing forward to the middle is not necessary for the healing. We know that. We know that Jesus could have healed him quietly, discreetly, and without fuss. But actually, he chooses not to. He chooses not to. Jesus, in this moment, refuses to let this man remain unseen. The man is not a distraction from worship. He becomes the heart of it. He's not an inconvenience. He is the focus of God's attention. And this is the first way Jesus exercises authority in this story. He sees the man. He sees him and truly sees him. And this is the way that he exercises authority in our lives, because he sees us. But he doesn't see us as an issue to manage, nor as a distraction. He doesn't see us as problems to be solved, but actually as people who matter. In Psalm 93, we are told that God reigns in holiness. Holiness adorns your house for endless days. In Mark, holiness is revealed not in distance or separation, but in attention and presence. Holiness looks like bringing someone from the margins right to the center. And I think that this really matters for us, because many of us know what it is like to sit quietly on the edge, whether it is in church, whether it's in our families, in society, where we're hoping not to be noticed too much, but longing to be seen just enough. To be seen more than just a shaved head. For us, to be seen by Jesus is not to be exposed. To be seen by Jesus is to be honored. The man's hand is withered. It's something that limits him. Perhaps maybe it shames him. It certainly affects his daily life. And most of us don't have withered hands. But I can pretty much guarantee that most of us have withered places. Parts of our lives that feel diminished. Hopes that did not unfold as we quite imagined them to. Relationships that never healed. Faith that once felt really alive, but now feels quite tired. And grief that has just settled quietly into our bones. We learn to manage, don't we? We learn to adapt. We learn how to present a version of ourselves that feels safer. We find ways of compensating. And maybe, actually, we stop expecting change. And often we assume that God sees the strong parts of us. He sees the useful parts where we can help and we can do things. He sees the faithful parts. But maybe we hope that he doesn't see the places that we would rather keep hidden. But Mark's gospel today gently but firmly says otherwise. Jesus sees the withered hand. He sees our withered state. He sees what other people avoid. He sees what we have learnt to live with and live around. But he doesn't turn away from us. He sees us. Jesus then asks a question. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill? It's a devastatingly simple question. And at its heart, it asks, what is God's law for? Interestingly, the leaders say nothing. Their silence reveals hearts that have become cautious, they've become guarded, more concerned with preserving control than with welcoming life. The Sabbath was given as a gift, a day of rest, restoration, and delight in God. Yet here, it's become a boundary marker, a test of obedience, and a tool of judgment. So silence fills the room. Anyone who has ever asked an awkward question knows that silence. We've all been there. The kind that reveals discomfort rather than contemplation. You don't know where to look. You don't know how to feel. Maybe you might even feel a little bit sick inside. Mark tells us that Jesus looks around at them with anger and is deeply distressed. And this, I think, is so important that we hear this about Jesus. That this side of Jesus that we hear, because it shows us that Jesus' authority is not cold or detached. He looks around at them with anger and is deeply distressed. It's deeply emotional because he is deeply loving. He is grieved when hearts harden against mercy. Psalm 93 declares that God's authority is strong and eternal. But Mark shows us that this strength is not brittle. It is strong enough to feel sorrow for the world as it is. Jesus then turns back to the man and says, "Stretch out your hand." And it's an impossible command. The hand doesn't work. But Jesus knew that. Yet Jesus doesn't shout, and he doesn't force, and he doesn't manipulate. He just invites. Stretch out your hand. And this tells us something crucial about how Jesus' authority operates in our lives. He doesn't put pressure on us, but he calls us to trust him. Calls us to trust him. And this man, he could have refused, he could have stayed where he was, but in responding to Jesus' words, healing comes. The authority Psalm 93 describes as reigning over chaos now flows through a simple invitation and a human response. The hand is restored. No drama, no applause, no big display, just a life made whole. Jesus' authority does not depend on a big spectacle. It doesn't seek to impress, and it restores quietly, completely, and lovingly. And notice this. The healing happens on the Sabbath. The very day that had become a symbol of restriction becomes once again a day of restoration. Jesus doesn't eliminate the Sabbath. He fulfills it. Shockingly, though, or maybe not, the response is not joy. The religious leaders go out and begin their plot for Jesus' destruction. I imagine them bustling out of the synagogue, very cross and bundling along. And this is what happens when authority is built on control rather than compassion. Mercy feels threatened by compassion. There is nothing more threatening to people who are exercising control than compassion. Kindness and compassion always win. And in these passages, Mark is already pointing us towards the cross. Jesus' authority will not be secured by force, but by self-giving love. The Lord, whom Psalm 93 declares to be eternal and majestic, will reveal his kingship through suffering. And as the passage continues, Jesus goes down to the lake, and crowds gather from everywhere. I love the imagery that we read in the Bible because it's there for a reason. It's there to help us to be able to understand. And this imagery here matters. The psalm from today speaks of roaring waters, of floods that lift up their voice. But yet here, Jesus stands unafraid, steady, and drawing people towards him. Even the unclean spirits recognize who he is. You are the Son of God. Yet Jesus silences them. And it makes you wonder why. Why does he silence them? Why wouldn't he want to take all of the glory that this is me, I am the Son of God, and I can heal people? He silences them because he will not be defined by noise or by fear or by spectacle. And still, in the midst of the crowds, he doesn't lose sight of individuals. The one who reigns over the floods still sees the single person. He still sees each one of us, even in the noise of the world and the noise of what's going on in our lives. He still sees us. So what does that mean for us here and now? It means that Jesus sees you. He sees us. The Lord, whose throne is established from old, sees us. not as a problem to be fixed, but as a person to be loved. Not just the parts that we are proud of, not just the parts that we show on a Sunday morning when we come into church and we speak to each other. Hi, how are you? Yes, I'm really well, thank you. Great, how are you? I'm great. How was your week? Brilliant. It's not true. It's not true. Jesus sees that. He knows, because Jesus sees the tired parts of us. The parts where we can just about put one foot in front of the other. He sees the wounded parts where our hearts are breaking, maybe for our families, for our friends. Maybe we've been hurt. He sees those wounds. He sees the withered places that we have learned not to mention to a soul. And it means that his authority in our lives is not about control or condemnation. It's about restoration. Jesus sees us to restore us. And Jesus still says, come forward. Come forward. Jesus still says to us, stretch out your hand. And he still takes hold of our hands. And he does this not to expose us, but to heal us. Jesus' authority invites us to trust him with what feels vulnerable. To step forward rather than stay hidden. To believe that mercy is so much stronger than fear. Psalm 93 reminds us that God reigns eternally. And Mark 3 reminds us that this reign comes close enough to notice our pain. So as we come to a close, my prayer for all of us, myself included in this, is that the Lord, who is King forever, will continue to see us, and that we will know that. That the God whose throne cannot be shaken calls each one of us individually by name, not by what may be wrong with us. The authority that reigns over chaos will choose compassion over control. And to be seen, for each one of us to be seen by Jesus is not to be judged. But I pray that we will know to be seen by Jesus is to be loved into wholeness. And that right there is an authority that we can trust. And we don't just trust that with our heads. We trust that with our lives and with our hearts. Amen. Amen.